We have restored tons of IBM PS2 systems on this channel this year, so it only makes sense to end 2024 with the last and arguably the best IBM PS2. In this video we are going to do a complete teardown, restore and explore the mighty Model 95. So this is a first generation Model 95. You can tell because the power switch is to the right. On later machines they move the switch to the left side and the panel to the right side. The last three numbers or letters in the part number usually tells the specs, but I couldn't find anything on Google, so I don't know how this machine came originally. The first thing I notice is this gap here. So something is wrong with this front panel. The camera is pretty good at overexposing beige boxes, so you probably can't tell. But this machine here badly needs a wash. It's actually pretty disgusting. These disgusting spots on the case tells us that we will probably find some sticky nasty foam inside the machine, like we did in the Model 80 restoration. The good thing about this machine is that it doesn't have any major dents or scratches. So if we can get this yellow grime off the case, I think we might be able to restore it to a really nice condition. There's a tiny hole here, so I wonder if it's missing a small knob here. At the back here we have a huge fan. This machine came out in 1991, and at the time pretty much every machine had an 80mm fan. But not this epic machine. That is probably a 120mm fan. We have two PS2 connectors and one serial and one parallel port. So that tells me this is probably an early motherboard too. I'm pretty sure the second revision had two serial and two parallel ports. The previous owner decided to keep two of the cards, unfortunately, but he left one graphics card and a SCSI controller. To get inside this machine, we need to pull the front panel off at the bottom edge down here. Now we can remove the entire front panel. Only one of 6 tabs is broken off, so I'd say that's pretty good. Inside the front panel we have a second front panel held down with these 2 tabs. With the 2 tabs released, we can remove this entire panel too. Okay, I think I see why there's a gap here. I think someone has installed this cover here from a different machine. So first of all, it's painted in a different color than these other covers here. And also someone has broken off the tabs from this panel. So it's probably not designed for this machine. From this side I can't really tell them apart. I'll see if I can figure this out later. I know there was an optional bezel to install a second diskette drive in this position too. So I think there was a special blank designed to be installed here. I thought the outside was disgusting, but that's nothing compared to the inside of this machine. This IBM has not been stored well. Yuck. So behind the front panel we have one hard drive, and up here we have one diskette drive. To get further inside we need to pull the side panel off. And here's our disgusting foam. This stuff is actually not as bad as the foam in the Model 80. This stuff has definitely decomposed, but has not gone sticky like in the Model 80. So it should be quite a bit easier to remove. And here's the first weird feature of the Model 95. Check out that fan. Okay, so either I'm wrong or this is not the original lid, because inside here we have a date. 19th of June 1995. That is 4 years into the production. From what I can tell so far, this is an early machine. So maybe someone replaced this lid. Or I could be wrong. Okay, more good stuff. The graphics card in the machine is an XGA2 card. That is excellent. Cards in PS2 systems don't have a screw here to hold the card down. Instead, they have thumb screws at the back. So now we can remove that card. Well, the card is dusty, like everything else inside this machine. But otherwise it looks pretty good. So I think it will clean up well. The SCSI controller is a Tribble card. Not a bad card, but I have an upgrade in mind. However, I'm not sure we will have time to make that upgrade in this video. But we'll see. The odd thing I notice here is that this card is not as dusty as the rest of the machine. So someone replaced this card. The CPU is not installed on the motherboard in these machines. Instead, it's installed on a separate card. So by pulling on these tabs, it can be removed. So by replacing the CPU complex, you could easily upgrade your machine. And obviously you still can, if you can find a faster board. This complex is a 92F0079, and actually it says 486SX25 here. So that is one of the slower ones. And same thing with this complex. It's nowhere near as dusty as the rest of the machine. One odd feature with the Model 95 is the massive power supply. It can be flipped out by loosening up this thumb screw and then tilting the power supply out. I know I said the power supply in the Model 80 was huge, but that thing is nothing compared to this. This power supply is about the size of 4 regular power supplies. It's just absolutely enormous. If you think modular power supplies is a new thing, well, IBM was doing this back in 1991. Oh, that was actually even earlier, because the Model 80 has a modular power supply too, and that machine is older than the 95. Since we're doing restoration, I'm going for a complete disassembly. That means removing that power supply. So with this bracket removed, I think we should be able to pull the power supply forward to remove it from the chassis. And aside from dust and crap, we've got a date in here, 1993. So I'm a bit confused about the age of this machine at the moment, but we'll figure it out. Behind the power supply we have a loose piece of plastic, and I think I know what it's for. I think it's one of these bits for cable management. So not a huge issue. Someone took cable management pretty seriously when designing this case. Okay, I think I managed to release all the clips without breaking anything. With the cables disconnected at the back, you can just pull that SCSI drive out. It looks to be an original IBM drive. We'll check it later and see if it works. Same thing with the diskette drive. It has a locking tab underneath. By pulling on that tab, we can just pull that drive out. This drive is made in 1992, and it's a 2.88 meg drive. So yet another date. There's a big plastic piece here that is removed by pushing it upwards. That allows us to disconnect the cable for the diskette drive and for the front panel. The front panel with the display and the power switch is called the operator panel. We'll talk more about that panel, but first let's see if we can remove it by pushing on these tabs. Okay, apparently that was how it was done. Oh, that's pretty cool. Check out these guys. These are not your regular 7-segment display panels. This is some kind of dot matrix panel. It looks really cool. I'll show you a close-up in a minute, but let's finish the disassembly first. Actually, I think we can just pull that panel out now. Yep. Let's go for the drive cage next. It's held in place with tons of 1/4-inch bolt head screws on the inside. But weirdly enough, not in the front. They use 7mm bolt head screws in the front. That's a bit strange. Why not just use the same type of bolts instead of having 2 different part numbers? Okay, with those screws removed, I think we can pull the drive cage out. Actually no, we'll have to remove the motherboard first. It's held down by a bunch of 1/4-inch bolt head screws too. To access the 2 last screws on the motherboard, I have to remove a couple of the sims. We'll talk more about these later in the video. But for now, I just want to clean this machine up. And here comes the motherboard. Wow, that thing is huge. Look at that chassis. That is some serious metal work. This machine was built to last. And I guess it did. With the motherboard out, we can now remove the drive cage. The last part to come out is the panel at the back. And this weird power connector for the fan that is installed in the lid. Okay, here comes the panel. Nice color. Looks kind of similar to the 8-bit BP6 project that we did on this channel a few months ago. Kind of looks like this part is coming off too. Yep. And inside here you can see why I'm so eager to wash this machine before we start working on it. I have a couple of similar drives and they are incredibly noisy. So I don't plan to use this drive. But I will clean it, test it, and then leave it in the machine. Almost all PS2 drives suffer from leaky caps. But I think this Sony drive is one of very few exceptions. So let's remove the drive sled and that absolutely disgusting lid. Okay, at least it's very clean inside. I can't see any dust at all. I'll disconnect the lower PCB and then I'll remove the screws from the PCB so we can flip it over. And apparently I was right. This is one of very few PS2 drives that don't have leaky caps. So this drive is ready for a wash. The power supply is put together with a mix of security screws and regular T15s. And the usual disclaimer, of course. Please don't mess around inside power supplies. There may be some caps inside charged with mains voltage. That being said, we have to take a look inside and make sure everything is okay before we can test this machine. So early to mid 90s, there's a pretty good chance there is a Rifa or Vima branded cap inside. A couple of more security screws here. And this seems to be a ground cable that is fed back into the power supply. And apparently a whole bunch of those underneath the power supply too. So these may not be necessary to remove, just to service the power supply. But since I'm going for a complete disassembly, I'm going to remove these too. This is a rather strange design. No less than 4 ground cables coming out through a hole and then connected to the chassis. Oh, there's actually 2 more on this side. Why was this power supply designed this way? This is very strange. The Model 80 has 1 cable installed in that weird way. But this power supply has 6 of the ground cables coming out and screwed in from the outside. Ew, that fan is disgusting. What the heck is this stuff? Yuck. But the 2 PCBs don't look too bad. They are dusty, but nothing extreme inside here. Strangely enough, I think we need to remove this 8mm bolt on the heatsink to take this power supply apart. That's a bit unusual. Okay, this took some figuring out. Apparently the 2 PCBs are held together with these really weird custom brackets. And they are pulled back at the same time as the PCB is raised up. Very strange and unusual way to mount a PCB. Okay, now let's see if we can at least tilt this PCB out. Well, sort of. We would have to desolder a bunch of cables to get this PCB further out. But we only need to remove it enough to check for leaky caps and reefer caps. So I think this is enough. And apparently this huge power supply is made by Zytec. Okay, there are no leaky caps and no reefer caps inside here. But there's tons of dust and tiny bits and pieces of that foam. So it needs to be washed before it can be used safely. Okay, everything has been washed in warm soapy water, except for this panel, the speaker and the hard drive. Most electronics can be washed in warm soapy water, but I didn't want to risk these dot matrix displays. They are a standard part from HP, but I think they have been customized for this IBM. So they are probably either impossible or very expensive to replace. This panel has a second switch here, It was clearly IBM's intention to have it accessible through the front panel, but for whatever reason they decided not to. The second switch enables or disables the automatic power on feature, and for some reason IBM decided to hide it behind the front panel. The motherboard cleaned up really well. It looks pretty much brand new. This board is absolutely enormous. It's kind of hard to show on camera. So for comparison, here is a regular 486 board. This thing is more than twice the size. And I think referring to this board as the early board is incorrect, because from what I could find online, it was manufactured simultaneously as the other board, which doesn't make any sense to me because they are very similar. So instead, this board should be referred to as the 95XP, and the board with two serial and parallel ports is called the 95A. I checked all the dates on the chips, and this board was manufactured in late 1992. There's no easy way to test this board since the power supply connects directly to the motherboard here. So we're gonna have to test it inside the machine. It's kind of strange that they didn't discontinue this board when releasing the board with more ports. I would expect it to be much cheaper to just have one part number and discontinue this board. The power supply is manufactured in early 1993, so probably the matching power supply. The power supply too cleaned up really well, and all the tiny bits and pieces of that sticky foam pad is gone, so it should be safe to use now. The XGA2 card and the CPU complex have matching dates, so these are probably the original cards. But the SCSI controller here is 1 year older than the machine, so it has probably been replaced for whatever reason. One interesting thing about the CPU complex is that it's almost identical to the board for DX2. The only difference I can see here is the missing Mathco socket. So we're going to play around with both of these and see if there actually is a difference. Okay, the IBM is mostly reassembled now. I had a look at these RAM sticks and they are all 4 meg modules. So plenty of RAM in this machine. And it can take a lot more depending on what complex you have. I think with this complex here we can go up to 64. But 32 megs should be sufficient for some DOS gaming, so I'll probably leave it like this. The massive power supply was an absolute pain to reassemble. The only issue I'm aware of with the Model 95 is actually this thumb screw here. If you over tighten the screw, it will come apart inside the power supply. And if that happens, you will have to take the power supply apart, find all the parts for the thumb screw and reassemble it again. So I'm just going to screw it all the way in, but not tighten it. I have cleaned and greased all the usual spots in the diskette drive, as I have done in so many of my videos. I dry cleaned the original SCSI drive and installed it. I also managed to figure out why there is a gap above this cover, and that is because this bay here is designed to take a bezel for a second diskette drive, just like this one here, or a special blank, designed for this bay specifically. So this cover is designed only to fit these two bays. The lower cover here is different too. Another cool feature of the Model 95 is that it can take 3 floppy drives. That is really neat. I wish more systems had this feature. So my plan is to install 2 more floppy drives in this machine and a CD-ROM down here. The second bay here can't take a 5¼ inch drive. It can only be used with 3½ inch drives. So I need to source one of those special blanks for this project and install the CD-ROM drive and the 2 floppy drives down here. The case cleaned up quite nicely actually. I probably spent 1 hour just cleaning it with a Scotch-Brite and a magic eraser. Not sure what the camera's white balance will make of this, but it looks a million times better than before. It does have a few small scratches, so it's not perfect, but neither am I. So the only thing left to finish the restoration part of this project is the IBM badge. As you can see, all the dirt and grime eventually came off. Okay, power, keyboard and display connected. Time to test this epic IBM. Fingers crossed. Okay, the panel lit up. This is sort of like a built-in postcard. So it's showing all the checkpoints while it's posting. 10, 25, 40, I can hear the hard drive spin up. We've got a cursor and one F. Wow, this thing is slow to boot. 52. And it's counting up the RAM. Awesome. So the mighty IBM is posting, and as expected, we've got 32 megs of RAM. And we've got error 17300. And the OP panel is showing the same error. Warning, the system had an error in the battery-powered configuration data. That is expected, of course, because I removed the coin cell when washing the board. Let me swap that display for something that is a bit easier to see on camera. The power switch has a sliding door to prevent the user from pushing on it accidentally. Some very early 95s didn't have this door. And apparently the users of those machines were complaining that they pushed the button by mistake instead of pushing the eject button on the diskette drive. Sounds kind of weird, but apparently that's what's happened. Okay, hopefully this is more readable to you guys. So let's just hit enter, and that will reboot the machine. And we've got a date and time error, so let's get rid of it by going to set features, set time and date. Yeah, there's not much left of 2024. And now we can go to set configuration and set and view SCSI devices. And apparently that noisy hard drive is 400 meg drive. And unfortunately it's making a high-pitched noise. Maybe I should edit, and perhaps we need to swap that drive pretty much right away. I was planning to leave that drive in for this video, but I'm not sure about that high-pitched noise. Let's go up to change configuration next. And in here we can see the 32 megs of RAM, the 2.88 diskette drive, the SCSI adapter, and the XGA2 card. Next I'm going to run the automatic configuration. Okay, let's see if all the errors are gone. And hopefully the mighty 95 is going to boot from that noisy hard drive. And the machine boots to PC-DOS 7. We've got a startup menu here with different memory options. Let's just pick something. Okay, so apparently it had CD-ROM installed. That has been removed by previous owner. Press and enter the carriage return key to accept the date. That's a fancy word for enter. Well, that drive is making too much noise for video, so we need to take care of this right away. I have a different drive in mind for this project, but that is for the upgrade video. So for now, let's just borrow the drive from the Model 80 projects. Oh, it almost fits with drive rails for an AT. They are just slightly too long. We could cut a small piece off to make this work, but this drive is going back to the Model 80. So I'll just do a temporary installation here, just so we can continue the video. That was actually a very easy fix. I just installed the drive between the two drive rails. This way we can push the drive as far as we wish inside the machine. Oh, I forgot to show the lid, by the way. So I did manage to get that nasty sticky foam pad off. It took about half an hour just to remove this small pad. And I used the same method as in the Model 80 restoration. Okay, and we've got a new error. Don't know this one by heart, but probably a SCSI error. And apparently this error holds the entire system. So let's boot with a reference disk in the drive. I'm a bit surprised by how clean this machine looks now. It had sort of a yellow tint to it before the wash. Now it has this nice creamy beige color. Okay, so we've got that same error again. But then the machine decided to reboot all by itself. Okay, it reads from the diskette drive. So apparently we have a working diskette drive too, without even replacing those caps. That's awesome. Okay, so we've got an IML error. That makes perfect sense since we replaced the hard drive. Oh, I just noticed my camera's white balance is making a mess of the colors when the display is turned on. So it adjusts the white balance to the display, and that makes the IBM look yellow. Yeah, with the display turned off, the white balance adjusts back to the IBM, and it now looks less yellow again. I have spent hours trying to set the white balance on this camera, but with any settings I have tried, everything just looks crap. So I'm kind of stuck with this. Okay, the PS2 decided to reboot again. And we still have the IML error. So let's go to backup and restore system programs and restore the system partition. And apparently I'm going to need a diagnostic diskette too, so I'll fix it. Creating a system partition. Awesome. Okay, leave the reference disk in the drive and press enter to complete the restore. So now it's copying data into the system partition. So apparently it needed reboots. So I guess we weren't quite done yet. Insert the diagnostic disk. Okay, so apparently we do need it after all. Well, that's an easy fix. They are available at Ardent. Armed with a fresh copy of the diagnostic disk. Let's continue. And it's adding some more data to the system partition. The restoration of the system partition is complete. Insert the ref disk. That's a lot of disk swapping. Okay, I think we're done. Now that's weird. We are still getting an IML error. Maybe we need to set the SCSI drive. So let's go to set configuration and go down to set and view SCSI devices. And here's our 9 gig drive at ID 6. So everything looks okay here, but maybe we just need to save. So I'm gonna hit F10. Enter and exit and reboot the system. Well, still that same error. So let's just try again with the ref disk. This machine needs a red power switch. Okay, so let's go to set features and go to startup sequence. And it's set to boot from the diskette drive first and then the SCSI drive. So everything in here looks okay too. So why are we getting that error? Okay, and apparently this is our problem. That hard drive doesn't have an OS installed. We're sure we installed something when we did the Model 80 restoration, but apparently not, or perhaps it has been damaged. So this should be an easy fix. I'll install DOS off camera and we can continue. Okay, I think I found the issue here. The IML doesn't seem to be compatible with 9 gig drives. So with a smaller drive installed, it now works perfectly again. So next up I'm going to do a whole bunch of upgrades and see if we can overclock this epic IBM. If you're watching this a few weeks from now, there will be a link on the screen to that video. If you're watching this fresh, hit the bell icon below and set it to all. And now is a good time to check out this video. I would end by saying thank you to my patrons. I appreciate your support. If you want to support me too, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get ad-free early access. If you like this video, let me know with a thumbs up in the comments. If you're a regular viewer, consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in 2025.